Don't really have anything specific that's on my mind right now, other than the fact that it's an absolutely beautiful morning. I think most of the United States is experiencing unseasonably warm weather right now. But I was thinking about mental time travel a little bit. And I think a good way to understand it is through music. I've always been into albums as far as music goes, from a wide variety of genres, but I was never into just a band's song or single or anything like that. I always like to get into albums. It's so funny. I mentioned in the last recording that I'm dog sitting right now, and there are two puppies, and it's like seeing the world through the eyes of a child again, you know? They're so full of life and just not a care in the world other than just playing. That's all they do. But I think these two, as far as I know, they're mutts, but the one has, I think they both have a little pit bull in them. Anyway, they play kind of rough. So if you hear little yelps here and there, that's them playing with each other. Anyway. So when I found an album that I really liked, I would just replay it over and over and over again. I would burn the CD, or we don't really use those anymore, so that reference is kind of lost on a lot of younger people, but I would spin that thing until it was worn out. And an interesting thing happens when you do that. After you stop listening to that album, you move on to something else. If you listen to that album 4, 5, 6 years later, a fascinating thing happens. And I was reminded of this the other day. Somebody sent me a message who I've known for a long time, and they sent me a link to a song. And they said, "Hey man, remember this?" And I saw what the song was, and of course I did remember it, and it was from an album that we were living together at the time that this album came out, and we listened to it a ton. And the fascinating thing that happened was I went back and listened to the album, and I really don't listen to a lot of music anymore, just kind of lost interest in it, but I was immediately transported back to the year and the time period that we were listening to this album, and a flood of memories came back to me that I had forgotten. Just not even big events, just small details that I had forgotten. And it's even more than, remembering events. It's an energy that you remember. It's just a general feeling of the time. And all of these memories flood back to you, and you're literally transported back to that time in your mind. And you are reliving moments, you're smiling from the fun times, you're remembering some of the times that were less than fun, you're immersed in that memory. And what did it is the imprinting of the music into your mind and your subconscious memory. And the reason that it is imprinted is because you listen to the same thing over and over and over and over again. And, with that soundtrack playing it was like the soundtrack of the time, as your eyes were recording all of these events and, the smells and all the other sounds that went along with that, this happens another way. It doesn't even have to be music, there have been podcasts or just recordings that I've listened to, and they're not even, some of them are more impactful than others, but if I go back and listen to an old podcast that I listened to once in the relatively recent past, I can remember exactly what I was doing when I was listening to that podcast. I'll start listening to it and I'll say, oh yeah, I was picking okra when I was listening to this, and it was hot as shit on that day. I remember that day. And then you kind of remember more things about that day. Anyway, I was just thinking about that, how that is, it's time travel essentially. And the media, of course, and those who created the media know this about the human mind and how it is able to be imprinted with energy, feelings, and everything that goes along with that. And so when you look at what the media does on anything that, or any event that has a lot of collective energy put behind it, you'll notice that, well, of course, the media in general always is supplying sound bites and talking points that they repeat over and over and over again in any given news cycle. And they're doing that for the same reason. They're repeating the same phrase over and over and over again because they know it's going to imprint into your mind and create that memory. And then that memory is associated with various thoughts and feelings. And then that memory is triggered into the future as many times as they want to trigger it by bringing up certain keywords or phrases. And this is how they can create dialectics between, different political parties or whatever the case might be. I mean, advertising does the exact same thing with their jingles or whatever. They associate a certain jingle with a certain symbol or certain imagery, and then that creates a memory in your subconscious mind that can be triggered by all sorts of things, and this is clearly seen with, people who impulse buy things and they don't know why they're doing it, but of course there is a subconscious influence that they're not aware of. So when you look at these events, I mean, of course, 9/11 is a perfect example. They replay the same footage over and over and over again. It's on a loop. It's looping in your mind's eye like an album that you listen to over and over again is looping in your, I want to say ear's mind, but, it's just the sonic version of the visual version, right? They're the same thing, the same memory structure, the same subconscious function. It's just one is sonic and one is visual. And, all the senses are the same way. You could be triggered, your subconscious memory can be triggered by smells or tastes or touch in the same way, So they loop the same footage over and over and over again. They loop the same talking points over and over and over again. And at the same time, they're imprinting those visual images and those sounds with a certain energetic pattern. Whether it be one that makes you happy or one that makes you scared or sad or, whatever emotion you can think of, it just depends on the event. 9/11 was obviously one designed to make the entire population traumatized with fear and anger and hate and just, terrified. And all of that is imprinted onto the looped visuals and the looped sound bites. But if you apply that pattern to what's going on to any major news event, you will see that it's the same exact pattern. Because, of course, they know how our mind operates, so they know how to manipulate it. It doesn't even have to be an album. If you were still in the phase of your life where you were consuming mainstream media and you were going out to restaurants or bars or whatever, just malls, all that stuff that's a part of mainstream society. Sometimes they'll have songs playing over the speakers in the establishment, and there's cycles of the one-hit wonders that get the radio play in the mainstream media. And so you can even be, if you're really, the only place I go anymore is a grocery store. Like once a week, and when I'll be in there and they'll play a song and it'll be not even something I was into at the time, but I'll have heard that song in the past so many times that it'll trigger memories of the time when that song was being played 24/7, all the time, and then that transports your mind back to that time. So I don't know if I really have a point to make here, other than this is just kind of what I've been thinking about in this moment right now. And the media does the exact same thing that this innocent process with music is exemplifying, is my point, I guess. But of course, the internet media now does the exact same thing. And you have all of these different... Now, of course, I'm speaking about conspiracy culture because that's what everybody listening to this is consuming. And you have all of these subcultures of the main theme of conspiracy theory. And each subculture has its own sound bites, its own mythos, its own talking points, its own imagery. And you see what they do is they have all of their characters and personas that are the representatives and promoted by all of the podcasts and radio shows. And they do their tours. They go to all the conferences. And they're the ones who reinforce all of the talking points. And so it becomes an echo chamber in the individual subcategories, regardless of whatever you're talking about. Some are more popular than others and put into the mainstream in a certain way. Some are completely suppressed, but each one has its own echo chamber of sound bites and talking points and visuals. And those are looped in a way that it becomes the consensus reality. And I was just thinking of a perfect example of this. So this is around 2012, I would say. I had just been getting into all of this information, and I was doing a lot of research at the time on, well, I don't even know if you can call it research, but I was getting into the subject of targeted individuals, gang stalking, reading up on all of the patents that are out there as far as mind control technology. And I was consuming all kinds of information about this in a very short amount of time. It just you guys know what I'm talking about, where you just get interested and hyper focused on a subject, and you just consume like all of the information that's out there about that little subcategory. And so it's on your mind 24/7. In a way, you're looping sonic and visual information in the same way that you would loop the same album over and over and over again. So not only are you creating impressions that will be recorded by your subconscious mind that will potentially be triggered later, but you're also being indoctrinated essentially into a certain idea of what is going on within that realm of information. And I remember this is when I was still drinking, and I woke up all this information is in my head. I wake up one morning, I walk out of my bedroom, and there's a light on in my apartment that is just not normally on. It's in this area that, for whatever reason, they put a light there, but I never turned it on, had no use for it. And I'm looking at this light, and I sit there and I say, oh my gosh, somebody came in my apartment last night and turned on this light to mess with me, because I had all this information in my head. Now, as it happens, of course, about 5 or 6 days later, I had that moment of clarity where I remembered, oh yeah, I was drunk and I was looking for something, and I turned on that light because I was looking everywhere for this thing and I couldn't find it. So I went to one place where I'm like, oh, I'm never over there, I'll go turn on this light. But hopefully you see the power of consuming information in that way. It can influence how you interpret the present moment. And this is what the mind does. With any event, your mind fills in the blanks. Like, say there's a supposed shooting, and all of the images that they're looping over and over again, you're saying, well, this doesn't look like it would look like in real life, but at the same time, you've never been in any sort of situation like that. You have no reference point for how people really act in that moment. Now, I'm not speaking for everyone, of course. I have no reference point for that. So your mind fills in the blanks based on all the other propaganda that you have taken into your mind. Movies would probably be the number one way. And you say, well, this is how they act in the movies, and they're not acting like they do in the movies, so this must mean that it's fake, you know. And of course, these events are much more complicated than just whether they're real or fake. Now, of course, this is not to say that things like targeted individuals and gang stalking are not real on some level. You know, where there's smoke, there's fire. But all they have, this is the beauty of it, all they have to do is actually do it to a very small minority of people, and then those real people try to get their stories out there and tell the truth about what's going on, and then they have their whole array of characters and personalities that take over the conversation and control the narrative. This is the nature of controlled opposition. They always lead the opposition, always. Doesn't matter what the subject is. And then your mind fills in the blanks, right? You say, okay, I know this is going on, and I've heard all these stories about it, and then something like that happens, and you say, oh, that's it. You know, and you can see how they could potentially drive people crazy with this stuff. Now, for me, something like that wouldn't even hardly bother me. And that's not to say that I want it to happen, but, you know, like if somebody was following me around, I wouldn't even be aware of it. I'm so in my own world with information just exploding in my stream of consciousness 24/7 that I am just like totally unaware of my surroundings in that way, like actually, you know, categorizing the interactions that I'm having. I would laugh about it, you know, like, especially since for me, the level of control that's going on is so far beyond mind control technology from the government. I mean, it's so much deeper than that and happening on a level that we can't even perceive unless you catch it happening in real time. You know, you can do the same thing with the information about UFO abductions. All kinds of stories, all kinds of people out there telling you, this is my abduction story, this is what happened. They could just make that stuff up. There's no, you know, they can't prove that in any way. Now, again, it's the same thing. There's probably a small minority of people that have had something like that happen to them. Is it actual aliens from space? Again, you know, we don't know if space is even real in the way that it's sold to us. And everyone is drawing their experiences of what an alien would be from the propaganda that is distributed by the very intelligence that is controlling the planet, right? Or is it at the very least setting the conditions up for us to control ourselves with our incorrect mindsets and thoughts about the reality of things. We have Star Wars, Star Trek, Battlestar Galactica, you know, all the Independence Day type films about aliens, you know, they put this image in your mind about this, you know, universal system of travelers, right? But it might not even be anything like that. Space might not be what we think it is. Then they'll take it to the next level, and you say, well, maybe it's an interdimensional thing, and you know, I saw John Carter, there's jump rooms on Mars, and they're just jumping planets, you know. So they tell you stories about what that might be, and at the same time, it could just as easily be the military with its own technology that is way more advanced than what we know is capable, or what we know they are capable of, and they're giving people abduction experiences. It wouldn't even have to be a physical thing. It could be an implanted memory. remote viewing, astral projection, those things are also undoubtedly real on a certain level, okay? I mean, there's government documents out there where studies were commissioned by the military to look into Robert Monroe's techniques to get out of body. So, of course, the military studied that in the, 80s and 90s, or possibly even way before that. And they're using remote viewers and astral projectors as a part of their control apparatus, But again, that sort of stuff doesn't even bother me. What are you going to do? Remote view me? I mean, you're going to have the most boring experience of your life remote viewing me, that stuff doesn't even bother me. And moreover, I have no interest in doing any of that myself. My interest is having my feet firmly planted on the ground. I want to connect with the earth. I have no interest, and it's so funny, the cognitive dissonance there with a lot of the people who are discussing these subjects. On the one hand, they're, again, repeating that looped information that's been around for decades at this point about reincarnation and soul contracts and their higher selves and the aliens that are, just outside of our visible atmosphere, cloaked, that are the white hats that are fighting against the black hats, again, the Jedi. Where did that come from? On the one hand, they're into all of that information and repeat it. Oh, the wind just picked up there. And repeating it, thinking that it applies to them. And again, the information or the idea that, the earth is a spiritual school, you signed up to, again, soul contracts, you signed up to be here to experience something, to learn, So just think about the cognitive dissonance of that idea, though, in the context of, okay, let's say that's true, and now you're on Earth, and yet all the information you're into is about you escaping your body. Well, what was the point of you coming here if it was only to receive information that makes your whole physical experience on the earth totally illegitimate in the eyes of that information, right? Oh, it's all just an illusion. I'm going to I'm going to try to astral project. I'm going to try to get out of my body. I'm going to try to remote view other people. I'm interested in all of these spiritual powers. Quote unquote spiritual powers. I mean, I don't think there's much spiritual about any of that stuff. So what's the point? If you came here to learn, are you learning anything if that's all the information that you're taking in? And maybe they are. Who am I to say? I don't know. Maybe that's their path. And maybe they have, the spirit of the person who is really into that information. Maybe it really speaks to them on some level, and it's going to help them wake up to the larger purpose of them being on the earth right now. And maybe there is truth to the fact that they've been reincarnated over and over and over again here. For me, my subjective truth is that I've never been to this planet before. I mean, every day I'm just more and more in awe of what is going on here. It's insane. So because I have that perspective, I look at all of that information that could be loosely categorized as New Age information, and I'm highly critical of it. Not the people who believe it. I'm just highly critical of the concepts themselves because, again, they are structural concepts. It's like in the information video talking about the chakras. That is a concept that has been implanted into your mind. It is an artificial limitation on your energy. That doesn't mean that it's not real. Of course it's real if enough people believe it's real. I see that as artificial structure because I'm viewing it as someone who has never seen any of these concepts before in the way that they're presented. And so they are all false in some way. They're not quite getting what is going on, And then the problem on top of that is a lot of the people that are discussing those topics, even though there's a lot of truth, embedded into those concepts that I mentioned, there's so many disinformation agents that are corrupting the concepts even further. And I just have this, it's like bursting out of me, this energy that cannot stand to see an innocent person be taken advantage of by someone that I know is lying and is not being honest. It's just like this. And it's something I have to work on myself. Because, of course, if I allow that energy to consume me, I'll be part of the problem. But at the same time, what are you supposed to do? Just let it go? Just not talk? I'm so torn about this, and I don't have the answer. A part of me is like, well, maybe your path is to expose some of this stuff. But then at the same time, I don't know. Maybe you just need to trust that the universe knows what it's doing. Creation itself will take care of it and take care of those people. But you see, even as I say that, I rebel from the idea a little bit because it wastes so much time. And by wasting people's time, getting them stuck in these loops and these rabbit holes, you provide more time for the agenda to continue unabated, It's such a difficult thing, We have, as human beings, we have this instinctual desire to connect with other human beings. And the problem is, especially when you get into the quote-unquote truth or things that are leading you on the path to discovering the truth, you want to share that with other people. The best advice that I can give to anybody that's new to this information is, under no circumstances, share this information with any of your friends and family. Don't do it. Just trust me on that one. If you're in that situation and you're listening to this video somehow, trust me. Do not do it. Because 2-3 years from now, you're going to look at the things that you think are true and you're going to realize that they aren't true. And you're going to be embarrassed with yourself for evangelizing those concepts to other people. And of course, this is part of the game that's played. You see, they know, like just as an American example, they know that the majority of people are coming, well, everyone's coming from the mainstream thought form. And there are certain personalities who are very passionate about what they think is true. And you can see these people exemplified by very passionate Republicans or Democrats or, Ron Paul supporters or whatever the case may be, right? They're very passionate about their beliefs. It doesn't even have to be politics. It could be whatever they think about sports or any of that stuff. And they want to let you know their opinion on it. Now, you see, they know that there's going to be a certain percentage of the population that gets into conspiracy theories or is, has awakening moments in their life that leads them to search out information on the internet, and they're trying to trap you in that web. And they know that when you get this new information, it's not any more true than the old information that you had, but the new information, they know that you're going to evangelize it. And see, this is how the system operates. It feeds on the real people who get the new truth, quote unquote, and then evangelize it. They start their own blog, they start their own YouTube channel, they start their own podcast. And they're not in any way disinformation agents. They genuinely believe that they've discovered a new truth. And because they're passionate about explaining what they believe to people and trying to convince them of their beliefs, they do the same thing when they get into the conspiracy theorist circles. And then the disinformation networks feed on that energy and they use it for their own benefit to give themselves both credibility and also to control the narrative. It draws other people in. The only times that I've ever been fooled by a disinformation operation are when a real person was also giving out information in that particular area, and they had me believing that they were real. And so I was fooled into thinking that the whole thing was real, right? Only to later find out that it wasn't. Just look at the patterns. Pattern recognition is so important. Every single genre of information on the internet as far as conspiracy theory goes, it starts as a movement, it's full of promise, everyone is excited, and then it is intentionally destroyed with drama or whatever else, that can come about as human beings interact. That pattern plays out every time. And then everyone that was involved in that movement who had their hopes up, well, now they're totally cynical and their hopes are destroyed and they're just done, So while we have this natural impulse as humans to want to interact with each other, and the internet is providing this outlet to do so, we naturally gravitate towards it in that way, but you have to be very careful about how emotionally invested you get into these personalities and their various groups that they are promoting. Because you see, the problem, of course, is, again, this system is, and the intelligence running it is never going to let you organize any sort of spontaneous expression of truth. And it's difficult, right? Because, again, the truth is spontaneous. It is in the moment. It's expressing itself right now in the moment. Now, people could get on Skype maybe and have a discussion about that randomly at some given point in time. But if you try to set some sort of time, like, hey, we're going to do this at, for example, 1 o'clock every Sunday, like they do at church or any other sort of organization like that, well, then it is eventually destroyed. Destroyed in the sense that all of the spontaneous interaction is taken out of it. And it becomes robotic and mechanical in the way that church has become this organized, robotic, mechanical routine. So, by deduction, you have to look at all of these organizations that are allowed to exist on the internet and tell the truth, as it were, in the same way. They are robotic and mechanical. Here's my podcast every week, a new video every Tuesday and Thursday, or whatever the case may be. A new interview Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or most of them aren't structured in that way. They just come out with videos every once in a while, but it happens on a regular basis in that way. And I mean, that destroys the entire internet right there, or the entire truth movement, as it were. But it's difficult because you're fighting that natural impulse to share with other people. And this is especially true of people who get into this information and then they look around at all the people in their lives around them and like, oh man, nobody knows what I know. This is hard. I want to talk to somebody about this. And I gotta say, I think you just have to get used to being a bit of a loner, I don't have any, I don't really have anyone in my life in that way. Doesn't mean I don't interact with people on a daily basis, but, I'm very much alone as far as discussing the things that I'm talking about right now. And I really feel for people that got into this information after they had, a wife and children. Well, that's got to be extremely difficult, especially like if your spouse thinks you're crazy, I mean, that would be a very difficult situation. And then because you have children, you actually have to worry about the future as far as their future goes. And that will trigger a whole different set of concerns. I really empathize with people that are in that situation because I don't have any kids or a girlfriend or anything like that. So you got to understand that about me when you're listening to me talk. Like, that's informing my view of the world. And if you're not in the same situation, you got to take that into account with some of the things that I'm saying. So my dilemma that I'm always struggling with is, okay, I could easily make this video exposing how these people are lying. If I do that, am I part of the problem? And most of the time, I honestly do not know. So the majority of the time, I just refrain from doing it. Sometimes the conduct is so egregious, or I've been involved in it and actually promoted it on some level, that I have to come out and say something because I don't want to be associated with it, you know. And in my particular situation, I have this whole network of people that are, you know, linking to my stuff, and I in no way endorse them doing so, but they're trying to associate their content with mine. And what, you know, I could make a video exposing them for what they are, but what's the point? I'm just giving them my energy at that point. And I think people are smart enough to figure out who is real and who isn't. Well, I didn't even believe the statement I just made. A lot of people are naive, and they don't understand the true nature of the internet, and they really don't understand just how fake a lot of it is. But at the same time, I just have to trust that they will find the information that will lead them to expand their own consciousness and their own awareness and their most importantly, their intuition, to where they'll be able to pick up on whether somebody's lying to them in 10 seconds. Now, of course, some are better than others as far as liars go. Some can make you believe a little longer than others can. Because some of the personalities will, they will not trigger their disinformation until 4 or 5 months down the road. And so you will think they are real, especially if they're very good at mimicking genuine intent. You might think they're real longer than you might otherwise view other personalities. But for the most part at this point, I can tell whether somebody's real within 10 seconds of listening to them talk. There's, you know, this, and see, this will tie it all together, right? Because like the album that you listen to over and over again, like the talking points on the news or the sound bites in advertising, there is an energetic imprint of intent to the sonic information. And you can intuit that all of that stuff is trying to manipulate you in the same way that you should be able to intuit, once you reach a certain level of understanding and awareness, whether or not someone's voice is trying to manipulate you. In other words, whether or not that person's voice has a genuine intent attached to it. And that is the key to navigating the internet and YouTube. So this is, you know, going back to my struggle, I really do struggle with whether or not I should do videos on disinformation networks or not. I pretty much stopped doing it, but, you know, there's certain things that I see that I'm like, well, no one else is pointing this out, and I probably should, but then, you know, it goes back to trusting that other people are going to be able to figure it out eventually, and hopefully in a shorter and shorter amount of time as things accelerate. So I don't need to worry about that. I should just worry about myself and my own path and my own journey, and just share stuff like I'm sharing right now that maybe other people are experiencing also, because, you know, I have no interest in waking anybody up to anything, you know, because there's so much that I think I know that I probably am wrong about. You know, that's just the facts. I've been wrong so many times in the past. Surely I'm wrong about a lot still right now. I really do feel that everything's going to be fine on some level, even in spite of this insane agenda that's going on around us. But that's only in moments like right now, where I'm at complete stillness and peace, embedded within the surrounding environment. All of the anchors from nature going on. The wind picking up. And the birds doing their thing.